Look at us today, and look at the people. We got people that are come visiting. I love it when people start popping in, and always
And I
encourage.
can't see. I can't see. So that's driving me crazy.
I'm
Oh
sorry.
wait, I see. No, I see now. I see. Hey.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we've got you. So you do see comments and reactions, right?
No, I don't see comments. I just see eyeballs.
Oh,
Oh wait, maybe over here. Hold on.
up in the window, there's a thing
Oh,
called
there it is. I got it. I got it.
cool. Yeah,
Okay, everybody. I'm really, as you guys load on, I want everybody to understand why we are doing this today. We got a
because we're
request.
insane, because we're crazy people, and we just want to talk.
Well, yeah. What'd you have for dinner last night? Anyways,
Yeah, I had I
anyway,
had I
okay.
had jalapeno cheese sausage for breakfast, if that counts.
Oh, yeah. I had grandchildren for
We're
breakfast.
not going to
But
get through this
anyways,
interview today. It's got to be a little bit outlandish.
okay, okay, okay. I have the major talking stick right here. Okay. Just permanent. Okay, so here's the deal, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We got, I believe it came through customer service. I'm not sure. Maybe somebody directly emailed me, but they wanted us to talk about the judging process. And I've only judged once and I will never do it again. I did not care for it. Somebody called and yelled at me after the
Oh,
fact.
what? Oh my God.
I'll tell you after who it
Somebody's
was.
got
Let's
some
say
sour grapes. Somebody has serious sour grapes. Do you want to
oh,
tell
it was
where? Do you
awful.
want to tell where that was? I'm interested.
Mancuso. What
Oh,
happened
well,
was
that leaves
we
it pretty varied. But you were one of three, right?
yes,
So there you go.
and I was the only American. I can't remember. There's like an Australian and a Japanese or something. What happened was there was a huge storm, and I think either Mary or Roberta was supposed to judge, and I can't remember, but I said, yeah, I'll fill in. Done.
No part.
Done. So Ricky has judged many, many, many shows from the little itty bitties up to the two biggies in the United States. And I'm going to say there are a lot of really great shows out there, but you've got Paducah and Houston that you have judged both. And I'm going to ask you questions. If you guys have questions to the side, I'll pay attention to that. But I'm really excited that we've got you for this, Ricky, because you've been in the trenches, right?
I have, and I see a few names I want to shout out to. I haven't seen Scarlet Rose in forever, so hugs to you, Scarlet. I see you out there. So many people that we just love in our community. It's great to see you guys here today. Yeah,
Exactly.
I, as much as you despise the judging process, I love the honor and privilege of the judging process. And I love mostly because I get to see those quilts with my eyes and hands and touching and seeing closer than we can ever get when they're hanging
Well,
at the show.
that's a pro. That's a pro. But before we get into what goes on in the room,
Yeah.
um,
Oh, by the way, look what I got. Look what I got here. Okay, Alex.
here comes the judge. Crack. God. But I want to see the snapshot that you took. I want to know which one's you out of the four.
Oh, this. Yeah. So I think I'm one on the right with the patchwork skirt. That's me. So, yeah. This is fabulous, you guys. AI is fabulous. Right before this chat, I went in and told AI I wanted some quilt judges in a judging room. Doesn't
Oh my.
quite look like this, but I think it's a riot.
Now, before we get into the judging, there's stuff you need to consider before, and I would like to open that up.
All right, so let's just start with the quilt you're making. I do want to get in the judging room, but people want to know, well, is my quilt worthy of being entered in a show? I'm going to tell you all quilts are pretty much worthy of being entered in a show. Whether they will get into the show is different. And I will also say don't enter quilts because you're expecting to win or you're expecting to get in because you're just setting yourself up for disappointment. May I just suggest that you show your quilts because we are inspired by quilts. You've made something, and it may not be a best of show quilt, but it might be worthy enough to get into that show. And it's going to be one of those quilts that somebody's going to say, you know what, I can't make the best of show quilt, but I think I could do this. And I think there's a lot of validity in that. We want to show our quilts because we love quilts. So when you're making a quilt that you know you're going to enter in a show, and I'll try to be brief on this, you just want every step of the way to do your best. If a thread breaks and you might, and it's like in an applique, pick out what you need to pick out. If this is a machine applique, pick out to where
Sure.
you heal that wound. You do not want that wound being seen in the judging room. If you have a 4-patch and it's off by 1/8 of an inch, you need to fix that piecing because you're now being judged on the quality of your piecing. If the points are supposed to be perfect and matching, they will be perfect and matching. But here's the final thing on all of this. You need to do the best that you can with whatever you intended to do. If you intended a seam to be straight, that seam needs to stay straight even after quilting. So you need to find a way to either anchor it or do something that the seams don't bend. If you intended your points to be chopped off, fine. It should be obvious to the judges that was your intent. If you're doing
Well,
raw,
like you think of the late Gwen Marston. I mean, hers are supposed
well,
to be like that.
right. It's wonky crazy. It should be
Yeah.
obvious to us that what you're intending is intended and it is being
Right.
done to the best of its ability. So whether it's a needle turned or a stitched edge raw or a raw edge, we're going to be looking at how well did you do what you intended to do. So in
Okay.
that
So
creation
execution.
stage, yeah, in that creation stage, even if it means I've got to take extra time to pick something out or choose a better color or whatever, you are in that stage making the best that you can because you know what you're going to do with it. So there, I mean, we
Right.
always should do the best we can, but when you really are looking at a show experience, step it up is the message there.
Right. And you look at Carol Berry in the comments, who did Color My World. It was her first quilt, and Barbara walked her through it. She did it in a wool applique, and she won. She won her first
Yeah,
quilt,
yeah,
you
that's
know? Okay, now this next one is dear to my heart because can I tell my little story?
yep, of course.
O Okay, there was a thing in California where it was a quilt show, and there was gonna be money given, and it was called, Road to California. It wasn't the Carolyn Reese one, and I went, "Okay, okay." I made this beautiful California map quilt. Some of you people might be familiar, and it had California bears on the bottom, a poppy, blah, blah, blah. I go to fill out the form, and it was depicting how you and your family got to California. Oh, but wait, I entitled it Bear West. And wait, I got best of show. Pretty
Well, I
cool.
think I think it was I think it fit within the genre of what was trying to be displayed. Obviously, you might not have thought, "Oh, I'm doing frontier wagon trains," but ultimately you did depict a story about your family coming to California. Congratulations. And for those of you that don't know, it's called Bear West by Alexanderson. Go Google that online. I'm sure you'll find it. You should have sent me a picture of that today. I'd have popped it
I,
in.
I just I was just thinking about that when we were setting up. But so you are read the rules. Like
Yeah.
how different are the rules, say between I don't want to know specifics, but say like Paducah versus
Yeah,
Houston. Those
they're
are
they are different, and it's really important. I don't care from the regional shows, all the way up to the top shows. You've got to read the rules to even see if your quilt's going to fit into a category. And sometimes it doesn't fit because of sizes. Sometimes it won't fit because it's too old. They will say quilts are eligible after a certain date. So don't enter a quilt that was made before that date. It's going to get disqualified. And that's a hard thing to find out. But whenever people do find out about it, man, it's going to hit the fan because that's not good stuff. So the people that are trying to get these quilts in there, they're trying to vet everything that needs vetted to get into the show, but just make sure you're staying within the guidelines. If it says no glitter, don't put your quilt in that show. because your
Okay,
glitter's
and
going to
then
get all
Laura,
everybody else's.
Laura's asking about pre-programmed machine pattern or hand-driven machine
Yeah.
embroidery, and
Can
are they the
you
same
just,
category?
can I say, just jot that down because it's kind of out of order. So we can talk about
Okay,
it.
okay, 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 got it.
I want to just stick with the rules. The rules will tell you if this is allowed. They will tell you
That's
what's
what I thought.
disallowed. And so
Yeah.
really, really, truly read the rules, make sure the size, and then make sure you're looking at the categories to make sure your quilt gets in the right category. Let me tell this to everybody, and this has been pretty much true across the board. A quilt will be moved from one category to another if the judges deem it to be in the wrong category. But it will not get moved if it is not going to fare better, which means if it's just down here and it's not getting a prize, we're not taking the time to move that quilt. But if it's down here on one category in third place, but over here it might get first place because it's the right category, it will get moved.
Okay.
That happens. So it's important to know that a quilt can get moved. That's judge's discretion, and that's if the show allows it. But generally, it's not getting moved to another category if it's in the wrong category, or it would have been better in another category. But if it's not going to win a ribbon or do better, it's not getting moved.
Okay, that's good information. Would you say that that's true of all the major shows
Yep.
that you've been involved with?
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. They're not going to say, "Oh, this is in the wrong category. We're going to disqualify it." It won't. Well, they'll just still judge it. But if over here, it's going to go, wow, it's going to get second place. Let's move it over here because
Okay.
it's really a good second place quilt in that category. They'll move it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before we get into the room, I want people to understand that questions are asked. There's like Carol's just asking, curious if quilt by check is allowed in Houston. I don't know. Read the rules. Okay. Just you guys read the rules. Really cannot answer specifics like this.
Yeah,
That's my
but it is true. Quilted by check in some cat and some shows is allowed. They just want the quilt. There are others that if it's professionally done by one person who's being paid to do that, it's not allowed. So again, it's back to reading the rules for the category for the quilts. Now, before you get into the judging room, Alex, we need to enter our quilt. So you need to measure your quilt. You need to write a really nice description that's probably less than 50 words, maybe 75 words, that really tells either the story of the quilt, the emotion of the quilt, not I used cotton fabrics and thread and
right.
because that we know that. Give us some meat and potatoes on that quilt. The other things in the judging entry form are going to say, is it machine quilted, hand quilted, digitized, computerized, on a long arm? All of those things are going to come up there. So make your artist statement or your description really meaty and fat and meaningful. Take some time to write that before you even get to the entry form. And then you need to take a picture. And Alex, I've got some pictures I want to show of quilts that were at Houston this year. So I know that these are the photos that were submitted, and that would start with this. This is Kara Rep's Pathfinder, and this won a top prize at Houston. The important thing about these photos is they need to be taken straight on. This is the look at the top, the bottom is absolutely parallel. The sides on the left and right are absolutely parallel. There's no skewing of the quilt, and it is lit beautifully so that you can, even in this picture, you can see the detail of the quilting, and at least in the white and in the red areas. You get a really good sense of the visual impact of this quilt. And then, of course, they're going to ask for a detail shot. I don't have the detail shot of this one. I'll show you some in a minute. But the important thing is straight on and all the way out so that the binding edges are absolutely shown. So this was a ribbon winner in Houston this year. Again, it's shot straight on. We see the lighting, we see the details. Personally, I think this photo could be a little bit better, but it's not enough to keep any juror, because the jurors have to look at these photos to even get into the big show. Somebody's got to look at a photo. If your photo's not good, you could have a good quilt that just doesn't make it into the show. So this is a few of my favorite things. And I think it's a wonderful quilt. Now, this is Hello Ladybug, and this one is by Yoshiyuki Ishizaki. Boy, that's a mouthful. But look at the edge treatment. We need to see this edge treatment, so don't crop it off. It has to be all the way out to the edges. And if you look at the white part, that's a square or slightly rectangle, but the quilt is fitting in that. It's not skewed. So I cannot tell you how much the lighting, the color, the detail, and clarity on these images needs to be. This is an important step of entering a show.
And I'm going to say, spend the money and have a professional do it. Get on with it.
Exactly. Well, the bigger the quilt, the harder it is to photo. If it's a medium wall quilt, it's more easy with our smartphones, but those quilts need to be very, very flat. Now, this is My Bohemian Rhapsody. This was a prize winner, won first prize in Houston, it won first prize in Paducah, it won some best of shows here and there. This quilt is what I would submit. Again, it's square, it's flat. You see the lighting, the detail of the quilting and the border. All of that is showing up, and that needs to happen in your photo. And this is the detail, but honestly, while it shows my blanket stitch, I think it's too close. I think we need to step back a little bit. And you don't want to do a style shot where it's laid over the arm of a chair. That is just not acceptable for a show. This is the one I would submit. Where I'm showing the
Nice.
quilting, I'm showing the applique. Maybe I could go in a little bit closer, but I just want whoever's looking at this to make a decision. In this case, I'm showing even a little bit of the piping on the edges. So there's details and things that they can see more closely in that picture. So I think it's really important to make a really, really good impression with your photography. And you know what? I will say this. The rejection letters often say, in lots of shows, not just one or two, the rejection letter will say, maybe consider better photography. Oftentimes quilts
Okay.
get in because of that, because nobody wants to say your quilt was crap.
And I want to
So
say
they'll
too,
blame it on
yeah,
something
this
else,
was like
right?
crap. I'm going to say too that the being juried in is a different group of people than the judges,
Yeah,
correct?
yes, and it's
Okay.
done on a computer screen. They don't get to touch them, they don't get to see them. All they have is a photo, and they've got this many quilts that they've got to look at, and they've got to whittle them down to this many quilts. And that chore is pretty difficult. And it's not until you get to be a finalist that the judges and the quilts go to the judging room, and the judges are going to be there, and the judging process takes place.
Okay. What about the room?
Ready to get in the room, are we? Oh my God, I'm nervous. It's fabulous. First of all, it's such an exciting time. In every case that well, not every case, because some shows, the judging room, you're judging a hung show. That's not the big shows. That's not Paducah. That's not Houston. But there are some shows that are hung, and then the judges go around and evaluate the quilts while they're hung on the stands. So that's kind of really an advantage, because one of the big things, at least for me, is how does this quilt hang? Even after shipping and all of that, Libby Lehman was the first one to teach me about the cooked bacon. And the cooked bacon is when your quilt does this wiggly wobbly on the edge. It should not.
Isn't that how they're, Ricky? That's how they're supposed to be. Didn't anybody tell you that?
No, the cooked bacon look is a real downer, because it's like your quilt just didn't get flat, or it hasn't been blocked or whatever. It needs to look pristine. It looks like a museum. It needs to look gallery. It needs to look great. And sometimes there's great workmanship and design, but there's something going on in the distortion of the quilting and a distortion of the binding that is causing rippliness, and that's the cooked bacon look. That
I'm going to tell you guys right now, too, this is a bugaboo of yours, like no tomorrow. I mean,
well,
this is a
you're now looking at deal breakers, okay?
right.
Because, all right, let me go back to the judging room. So some of them are judged hung, not many, but some are judged hung. Most of them are judged flat on a table. And in many, many cases, the category is going to be presented to us first by what we call the parade of quilts, or the fanning of the quilts. And that is just whenever you're going to see all the quilts that are coming to you in this category. It's just, we may see half of the quilt, Oh, wow, look at that. Ooh, look at that. Oh, I don't know about that. Look at that. I mean, we're just really fanning the quilts that are on a table to see half of them, just to kind of get an overview. Sometimes that is a quick parade of just here's the quilts, let's just do that. But what will many times happen is not every show, but in many shows, there's going to be we're going to call it catch and release, but it's a keep and a release. We know fairly quickly what quilts are going to be on the cream of the crop and which quilts are probably not going to be up there in the consideration for ribbons. So that is the two piles. There's the release pile, there's the keep pile. And in that particular situation, everybody needs to know that every quilt is still going to be judged. Every quilt is still going to be looked at and scrutinized, and comments are going to be made on it. And we will then go to the release pile and start making our comments. I cannot tell you the number of times a released quilt is suddenly like, wait a minute now, this is better than we thought. And it moves
Mm-hmm.
over
Mm-hmm.
to the keep pile. So that you're not out of the loop if you've gone to the release pile, but we have to take maybe 35, 40 quilts and whittle them down to like 8 because we still have to whittle it down to
Right.
3, right? Usually that's whittling down is to about 6 so that we can choose our top 3. Sometimes we want to have, I don't want to call them honorable mentions, but 4, 5, and 6, because in some shows, if you receive your first prize, you're in the first place, that quilt is considered for hire, for workmanship or best of show or whatever.
Oh,
If it
okay.
comes out of that category, number 2 moves up to number 1 and so forth. So we
Okay.
need to have these other quilts in line to move up. And so essentially what's happening there, Alex, is we're trying to call the quilts so that the cream is rising to the top. And usually that top is 10 quilts, but
Okay.
it's still got to get narrowed down. So we still look at them, and I can't tell you. I mean, I really truly had, I'm going to say, released quilts that have gone back onto the keep table and even risen up into the category. So, but we're looking. So, what are we looking at? In the fan, we're not making any decisions in the fan. Okay, if we're just fanning it, or if there's just a quick parade of quilts, because if they're smaller, there might be a parade of quilts, and we're just going, we're just looking at them. But then we go keep and release. And then we now go through the judging process where all 3 of us stand there and have a discussion about each of these
So,
projects.
so like, how many people are in the room? I mean, you have a ton of
So,
assistants, or like, what's the
so
deal?
yeah, so the organizers are going to be there. They're going to have several assistants in the room, anywhere from, I don't know, 6 to 8 people maybe that are helping move quilts around because we're not moving quilts around. We're not organizing quilts. We're just simply looking at the quilts. So it's amazing how that dance happens because we are studying the quilts, we are writing our comments, and then things are happening just magically to make sure that all the quilts stay organized and get to where they need to get, and that either tallies are written down. There are situations where numbering systems are involved. There are situations where there's no numbering systems involved. There's a show in particular where, like, you've got your top 8 quilts, and there'll be a drop where all the quilts are hand by hand by hand by hand, and they're kind of half folded up, and 1, 2, 3 drop, and 8 quilts come dropping at one time. And then in that situation, we're able to go, wow, what's hitting us in this situation? What really made the impact? Because we know these quilts are in the top. There are different ways that different quilt shows do that. Sometimes they will say we're going to put these up on a frame and we're going to look at them in a different way. But now we're really studying and having discussion on what's standing out. Can I also say this? Not always, but it is more often than not, first prize is going to hit all 3 judges as first prize pretty quick. And then we may go, yeah, that number 8 needs to be released and that number 7 needs to go. And now it's trying to find the second and third that's harder than the first because this fourth one, what's pushing this one out and pushing that one in? Sometimes that's the thing. And I really have to tell everybody, I mean, I'll just go to Houston this year. In Houston this year, we had big numbers in categories, and I walked through that show going, this is a gorgeous quilt. This is a beautiful, honorable, outstanding quilt, and it doesn't have a ribbon because there's umpteen quilts and only three of them could be. So it doesn't mean that you're not good. If your quilt doesn't get the ribbon, it doesn't mean it's not good. And the things that we see in the judging room that could be, there's tensions on the back of this quilt that are messed up with machine quilting. And it might only be in a small area, but it's setting apart that's why I'm back to in the room when you're making the quilt. If something's not right, you need to fix it before it goes to the show, because we're seeing things that you don't see when it's just.
So, so here's a question for you. What I'm hearing you say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that in the end, technique will win over design?
Mm-mm. No,
Okay.
they're both, in my opinion, very equally important.
50-50?
Yeah,
Okay.
so for me, and I think this is true just about every room I've been in, the reason we do the fan and the reason we do all that first thing is because we're looking at visual impact. How is this quilt hitting us? And you say a whole cloth quilt can't compete with this bold, crazy, wonderful color design. Oh, yes, it
Mhm.
can. If it hits you just right and it's really well done and crisp, a whole cloth quilt can hit just as hard as a major applique quilt. But it has
Well, and
to hit us.
let's just talk away about too this year at Houston. I mean, my gosh, best to show was a small quilt, but it's my understanding that the judges kept getting drawn back over to it. It just kept calling your
It
name.
it yeah, I mean it did. That quilt was amazing. It's 17 by 18 inches, and it takes a whole lot for a small quilt like that to have a big impact over those big quilts. But we just kept being drawn like a magnet back to that quilt.
Mhm.
So visual impact though is the important thing. That's where we're starting, and then we go into it to look at how is the design, is it balanced, are the color choices good, all of those things. The use of fabric. Oh, it could be wonderful use of fabric, or the fabrics don't quite jive together. There's those kinds of things, and we try really hard to keep subjectivity out. I could never. I mean, first of all, I like all colors. But to say, well, I don't really like yellow and this is a yellow quilt, I mean, that's just not a proper judge. Putting your I like it, I don't like it into the mix is not really what should go in there. Yeah.
Another question. We know that there are certified judges and there are non-certified judges. Um, um, Talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so the National Quilting Association, which is now disbanded, they used to have a certified judges program, which has continued on since that. And I think it's a really wonderful and valid program for quilters that need to have, that want to kind of be available for judging. They more often are going to judge regional and local shows and so forth, because
Mhm.
it gives them a stamp, it gives them some credentials. I think that in the bigger shows, I don't see that happening as far as like we
Mhm.
must find certified judges. What they're looking for is qualified and competent people that have been around the quilting pool hall, that know design and know what is going to be presented. Um,
Maybe that's why I'm never asked. Or maybe words on the
no, no,
street,
no,
don't
no. I
ask.
think the words on the street don't ask Alex, right? Um, so I mean,
This
anyway,
is so good.
it
Here's another things are just popping in my mind,
okay, okay,
okay?
yeah.
Would you suggest that people or no, you don't see the quilts when they arrive. I'm wondering, like, let's say they are folded or something and there's a problem with a line or something.
Well, so the Very few quilts are not going to be folded, and they do. And of course, they're going to sit there for a while. But here's the thing, the shows really do try to present those quilts really well. I am not looking at a quilt and going, oh my God, that's a horrible crease. I'm sorry, this quilt's going to be rejected because there's a horrible fold. That doesn't really come into play in my brain because I know that's not the maker's fault. I also know that the quilt shows, many of them, I'm not going to say all of them, will do everything they can by steaming or laying them flat for a few days now so that
Right.
they're getting rid of those creases so that you don't see those when it's time to be in the show. So I would not be necessarily putting a huge negative on that because I know that's something that's not the quilt. That's not the visual design. That's not the workmanship. That is just a function of shipping a quilt.
I'm going to say this too. Oh my gosh, did I just forget it? Come back.
I
Has that ever happened to you?
yeah, it'll come
Oh, no,
back.
here it is. Here it is. I can say this because we've already said it publicly that this year, the three of you at Houston, there was not one disagreement, that you guys were
Okay,
in
so yeah, so
sync.
let's talk about disagreements in the quilting room.
I was going to say, how
All of our
important is that?
decisions at Houston this year were unanimous, and I know we're not supposed to be talking about what happens in the judging room, but it's kind of a fun thing to say because it's not really changing anything to tell you.
Right.
We had a really good experience, and there were no disagreements that we had to kind of negotiate. But negotiation is a thing in the judging room, and I love it when it happens because I love the dialogue that somebody else is bringing to that quilt that I might not be seeing. And so when we come to a situation of like, oh, is this second or third? And well, I think this should be third and this should be second, or whatever the case may be, we each take our talking stick, okay, and we do our spiel. And let's just say that me is against Judge C. And Judge C and I are truly disagreeing on this, but it's all between two things at this point, this one and this one. Well, guess where the tiebreaker is? It's the third judge. And I can totally accept that because it just means that two people were more passionate about a certain issue on a quilt than I was and move on. It happens, but it's not sour grapes at all. It's just, it's great that there's three people to
Oh,
break.
absolutely. Absolutely.
You want to talk
Um,
about recusing?
what do you mean?
Um, let's just say I bought a quilt and I own a quilt that's in the show and I'm judging it.
So let's just talk about that, Ricky. I suppose that sometimes that may have happened to you in the past.
Yeah, and not just me, but it can happen because there's either a connection or a too closeness with a particular quilt that's come across the judging room. So recuse yourself. And in this particular case, it would be a situation where the two judges are going to now judge the quilt. If they end up having a conflict on that quilt, there's going to be an administrator that's going to step in to tie break.
Okay. Okay.
Okay? Yeah.
So like, let's say you were planning to enter a quilt, let's just say in Paducah next year or whatever. You cannot judge.
I am planning to enter Paducah next year and Houston next year, and I will not judge either of those shows because
So what if, okay, I'm
you're
not
not going to
doing it.
judge your own quilt.
What if I were judging, okay, and I'm not going to be, and it was your quilt? Is it, would I
You
recuse myself?
you wouldn't recuse yourself because there's no way that three judges that are professionals in this industry can walk into a room and not know some of those quilts.
Right.
There's no way. So it's only when there's a real conflict of interest in a quilt that would make that difference. So in the case of a judge that's purchased a quilt that owns that quilt, it's best to just be honorable and say I'm recusing myself from this
Okay.
decision.
Okay.
But
So
but
any other,
but
any other last tidbits? Sorry.
yeah, but no, I'm just trying to think. Let's just look to see if there's questions while I'm blabbing here. I'll
Well,
let
Jenny Lyons just said something that I think is so true. Same quilt, different awards or not in different shows. That is just it's not so much about the different judges, it's also about the different pool of quilts in that category.
It is. So you don't have the same quilts at the same show, and you have three different judges looking at three, looking with different eyes. And I know that a best of show quilt in one show might get a third prize at a different show. That happens all the time. That brings me to a quilt that I want to talk about, Alex. This quilt is called Sanche de Temps. I made this quilt in 1999. Okay, it's hand-dyed fabrics. It's just an iconic and fun and favorite quilt for me. I entered this quilt into Houston in the 1999 show, and from the juror pool, it was rejected. That quilt was rejected from Houston. So I got my rejection notice and I'm bummed, but it was still eligible by age the next year. So I entered it again the next year, and Sanche de Temps got into the show the second year because it was still eligible by age, and it won a $5,000 Master Machine Award. So
Okay, I got some
you
good
can't
questions
worry
here.
about the rejections. It doesn't mean your quilt is horrible. It just means it didn't get in. And if you don't
So,
win a prize, you may not win a prize, or you might win a prize. And it's always should be exciting and wonderful to win a prize and not be sour grapes at, well, this one won first prize. And I think
well,
my
I got that festive show and it didn't get anything on the next thing. Okay, here is something that I personally have feelings about. Patty Holly said, okay, to have a quilt judged in a big show is an original design mandatory.
not even, but you need to read the rules because
Okay.
generally kits are often not acceptable. Patterns may be acceptable, and then there's going to come, well, this is a 100% original design, and this one is a pattern from somebody else that this quilter has constructed. Which one of those quilts is going to take higher weight? That's a
So
really hard question.
I yeah.
In the event that all of the fabrics, the color choices, the workmanship, the quilting, and all of that, and you've got an original and a pattern quilt, and they are truly equal in our eyes as far as the score, then maybe the original would be the tiebreaker.
Okay,
But if
this
the
is a good.
original was not quite up to snuff, then the pattern quilt will rise higher. So
So, are the categories at the big shows the same or similar? Read the instructions.
they're quite a bit different. So read the instructions. I can tell you Paducahs are often the categories are based on how it's quilted. Stationary machine movable where you free motion versus on the frame where you're long arming, and it'll be wall quilts, long armed wall quilts, domestic. It'll be that. And you get to a place like Houston where it'll be this is an applique quilter, this is a pictorial quilter, this is a pieced quilt. The way those are put up in the rules are different from show to show. So it's back to reading the rules, reading the categories.
Okay, and Sally says this, ask this, who judges for the other prizes, like for machine quilting? It's the same
It's the
judges.
same judges. So once we've gone through the categories and we have a first, second, third, and probably a fourth, fifth, and sixth lingering down there, we then have to look at the top prizes and we have to start pulling from those. Now there are some shows that will only let you pull from the first places. There are other shows that will let you pull, like you could pull best machine quilting from a second place if it truly is the best machine quilting. So again, it's just whatever the organizers are. And please understand, this is really important. It's their quilt show. It's their rules, whether it's Paducah, Houston, or Bloomington, Illinois, or the Mancuso brothers. It's their shows. It's their game to play. It's their rules to make. So
I love that.
if you think, well, I don't think that an art quilt should be based on somebody else's photograph because that's not original, and I'm not trying to be smug. I'm trying to say that comes up. If that is allowed in that show, then you have to allow that in that show and not complain about it. It's not yours. It's not your show.
And I think that's really important because periodically there have been like little hoo-has going on in the quilting world, like, well, they won't take this or they won't take that. Hey, it's their party. You know, it's their
It is.
party.
It is. Can I just? I want to just go back to, because this is kind of a fun, I love. First of all, I love talking about this, so I'm not in a hurry to get to the end of this road. Carol Breyer Fowler won Best of Show in Paducah in 1989. 89. I wasn't a quilter yet, but she won with Solar Corona #2, and that quilt is stunning beyond measure. It is. I think it's probably the most iconic quilt of the 20th century. It's fabulous. But I'm talking about Hit the Fan. Oh my God, the hubbub and the hullabaloo and the anger and the vileness that came out of that, because it won Best of Show in Paducah and it was machine quilt.
Being
We're not
quilted.
talking long arm. We're not talking long arm. We're just talking machine quilted, and that's just should not be acceptable. And now it's, I mean, now we look at the difficulty of doing free motion domestic, and then long arm. My quilts that I've all of my prize winning quilts have been quilted on a domestic, and most people think I did it on a long arm. I didn't do it on a long arm. But the point is, we are a growing community. And now it's so acceptable. We have learned to accept our diversity in the quilting industry and accept this. And now we're even to the digitized stage. Even if it's digitized, somebody still has to do it, and it has to be done well. So whether or not you think, well, that's a digitized quilt and this one I spent 3 years hand quilting, it's not mean doesn't mean it's better. It just
And,
means it
and
took longer.
and Kimberly, the judges are not aware of who's made the quilts, but I can tell you right now, Carol Breyer Fowler quilt shows up, and you know it's hers. I mean,
Not
people
can I
think she's
say
got it.
not can I say not always. I've been in that
Yeah.
room and been surprised that, oh my God, that's Carol, because they will surprise you. So no, they never say who judged it. I mean, sorry, who made it. They don't even tell us where it was made. But we do get to hear that little statement that you wrote about this quilt. So if there's some poignant meaning behind it, we get that. If there's something funny behind it, we get that. And that may not influence the workmanship, but it does help us understand quilts a little bit better. And there is no way that anybody, because we go to shows, we see shows, we are going to know quilts that are in that judging room. And we will say, well, I know who this is because they won Best of Show at such and such a show. But it's not going to influence, well, they won Best of Show there. We don't want to give them Best of Show again. No, that just doesn't even compute in my
Right.
head, because
Right.
we're there to judge
So,
the quilts.
so Laura, as far as seeing a lot of fabric designers entering shows, that's you can't answer that. Who knows? You
I
know,
don't,
who
I
knows?
don't, but I don't. Fabric designers are mostly fabric designers, and I don't see them entering shows. I can tell you
Well,
that.
they're kind of like a different breed.
Yeah. I came
Yeah.
into the quilting industry, Alex, through from showing. I didn't come in through teaching. I didn't come in through designing. I didn't come
Right.
in through book writing. I literally came into this industry because I entered my quilts in shows. Now,
Okay, and Paul, who's always here, says it's about excellence. That's correct. Okay, one more thing to go. We have one more thing to say before I have one more thing to say.
me?
Yeah. Aren't I a good interviewer? You
Well,
got something
yeah,
else?
no, it's good. You always leave the door open. Here's the thing. People will say, I don't enter shows. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put myself out there. And it makes me sad personally, because I love quilts. And I will tell you that we're talking about the creme de la creme of quilts and workmanship. But I celebrate every quilt that is made. I don't care how remedial it is. I don't care what ugly fabrics you used. I don't care if it's, I just don't care if it's tied. If you made something out of love from your heart and spent the time on it, I celebrate it. And when we move into the realm of judging, we just have to put things into a different light for workmanship, for design, for excellence, and all of that. But it does not invalidate whatever you're making, whatever you're sending in a Christmas
Right,
package this year.
right,
It is all
right.
beautiful and all wonderful in my book. And I would celebrate any creativity that you put your heart into. And
Even my yellow star quilt with the potato chip edge.
I love your yellow quilt with the potato chip edge. I mean, seriously, I like what's your first quilt mentor? What's her name?
Oh,
Your
Lucy Hilty.
Lucy Hilty. Your Lucy Hilty grandmother's flower garden bath mat. I
No,
celebrate.
that's not Lucy Hilty. That's called graduating from college. It was my grandma's.
Whatever.
But
I
but
celebrate it.
Thank you. And I want to thank everybody for watching today because this is a boatload of information. I mean, a
Yeah.
boatload. And it's reminding me why I don't want to do it. Often this can take several days, you guys. I mean, this is a
Yeah.
big deal, several days.
Yeah.
All right. So what I want to say right now is what's coming up because I'm really excited about Monday's show. I just watched Lilo got an interview with where'd you go?
I left it for you for now.
Okay. Teresa, where'd it go? Teresa Durier Wong. She had a special exhibit at Houston where she started acquiring antique quilts, tops, and then what she's doing with the quilting on it. And I just watched it before this, and it is really, really good. So I commission you to come back Monday at 10 o'clock Pacific. Also in the United States, it's Thanksgiving next Thursday, a week from tomorrow. And so I will not be here Wednesday, but we'll be catching right up after. We got a ton of really great interviews. I have a lot of things I want to teach you. And Ricky will be sharing with you also. So it's all goodness here at thequiltshow.com. I would like to ask you to support us. We are the best bargain in the quilting world. I don't like the word bargain, but for basically
It
50
is a
bucks a
bargain.
year.
It's a
Well,
bargain.
it is.
We've got 400 and umpteen shows that they can watch like Netflix. All the time they're sewing, they can be watching quilting and learning.
Right. So please, please, please join us. We want you to be part of the family. And I know I feel like I'm seeing the names here. You are our family. And I know you feel the same way, Ricky.
Thank you so much, everybody. You're awesome. We love you so much. Thank you for being part of not just our quilting community, but truly being part of our family. Yeah, we'll do the little loves and hearts. I'm not so good at that. I got to get better. All right. You
You
guys
can
be
do it.
awesome. All right. Goodbye, everybody. Take
Bye bye.
care.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cheers. Bye bye. If I can find the button to close out, I'll be even happier. There